time for, excuse me, time for another little update. So a couple things. Sorry, the sorry, should have my train of thought together before I started the video. The connectors that I was talking about that were leaking last time, somebody, one of the people in the forums, dang it, why do I not look this stuff up before I start? Pony, who had commented before, had commented about if they were strong enough to support the fuel pressure with the 3 fuel pumps. I did check their website, and they sent me some specs and stuff, and they're good for, I can't remember, it's like 400, 500, 600 PSI, so they're good. What it was I had the wrong fittings in the wrong ends, basically. And so I contacted the vendor about getting different ends, because what I ended up doing was, you can kind of see down in there, I ended up switching them around. Basically, I had what was coming out of here was not the quick disconnect one, but was the reverse piece of that. I keep getting my finger in the way. The reverse piece of that was coming out of the fuel rail, and I had the quick disconnect basically on the fuel line side, and basically I had the wrong ends on there. I just wasn't realizing it, because I was basically having the AN line going into here and the orb line or the ORB line going into here, and they actually should have been reversed. So my initial thought, just for like space reasons, was that's how I wanted the configuration. So I had asked them if they had any of the quick disconnects here with AN fittings on them and stuff, and they don't. And basically their advice was either to get an adapter, which I did do and did it that way, or basically just reverse the configuration, which is what I ended up doing, and putting the orb line with the O-ring on the fuel rail side, because obviously this is not an AN and their AN's over here. And so I just reversed them, and that works, I think, for the most part. We'll see long term if I switch it back and just use that adapter, but for the moment it does work. And that was the whole fuel leak issue. That just my fault. I guess I hadn't even thought about, I had all the right pieces. I just, in my mind, wanted them to go the other way. And the vendor's like, no, you should really flip them and do it this way. So, and he goes, you can do it the other way, but you're going to have to use that adapter. So, like I said, not a big deal. Just in my mind, I just had it the other way around. So that was the issue there. And then ended up having a issue when we got it all together. I got the fuel pressure tested out good. And I must have had a little bit of a leak before in my old system, or not, because I had used to, you'd run it, and then after a day or two of sitting, the fuel pressure would drop and would have like almost no fuel pressure. And now it can sit for 4 days, and it's still got 20 pounds of fuel pressure in it. So I must have had just a tiny leak somewhere in the system for quite a while before this. So, but now this seems good, and it seals up tight and holds pressure, for days. So I think we're looking pretty good. So as far as that goes, and then I discovered when I removed the system there, the EGR system, I thought all it was removing that tube, capping it off, and capping this off, but it turns out there's more to it than that, and then adjusting the tune. There's actually more to it than that, because this is also like a part of the EGR system was also like a manifold pressure sensor was part of that too, because I kept getting supercharger inlet pressure too high, and it was running really weird, and it was acting really weird. And so upon doing some more research on it, I found out that when you do delete the EGR system, you actually have to take the sensor, this piece, off of that whole EGR system, and you have to take this off because it does need the sensor to be hooked up so that it can register the pressure in the supercharger to know, if it's good or high, or, what it needs to do. The blow-off valve needs to be open or whatever. So it needs that. Some of the instructions I found were talking about, tapping this and putting in, you know, an adapter and stuff like that. I ended up, just because I was trying to get things going and whatnot, so I ended up just getting a couple different pieces of hose here, as you can see, and putting in a couple reducers. And I just kind of did it that way, and just have the little sensor sitting over here and a couple of the other pieces capped off on it, like the instructions side. So that is that. So like I said, it turns out if you delete your ERG, there's EGR, sorry, there's a little bit more to it than just deleting, capping things off. That sensor is important and does need to be hooked up. So that is about it. I have been working with Dennis. The tuner's been helping me, and we have been trying to get things set as far as the tune goes. Ended up talking to him about, he had been trying to start from scratch, you know, with all the data and the fuel injector data and this and that. And because everything on this has been so changed and so custom, it was causing him problems last fall. So after talking, he's like, you know, why don't we do it this way? He goes, you said the car was running pretty good when you were working with the last tuner before you had all the problems. And the only thing was you're working on some idle issues, you know, coming to a stop and stuff like that. And I said, yeah. I said, maybe the logs would show something different, but it felt strong. It felt good. You know, she pulled hard, pulled like a freight train. The only issue was when coming to a stop, it was that high hang idle. And then when he made some adjustments, that was wanting to die. It said, so he like overcompensated and it was trying to die. He's like, all right, let's do that then. He goes, let's start with that. And he goes, I'll just work my way backwards then and put in my adjustments that I want to see in it once we, you know, kind of have a good working base model. And he goes, I'll make adjustments from there. So instead of starting from scratch or trying to build up, he goes, let's just take something that's working. And he goes, I'll just kind of back into it and, you know, with the adjustments that I would normally like to see in the tune. So that's where we are kind of at the moment. It took me a while. I had kind of forgotten, because it had been almost 2 years since the car had really run with that other tuner. And so I'd kind of forgotten, you know, a bunch of stuff. So I originally had given him some wrong information, some wrong tunes to look at and logs. And then we were having all these problems. I just sat down and started thinking about it. I'm like, well, it was at the drive-in that we went to and came back from, that he was working this on, and that was the last day it ran, was coming back from that drive-in, and the drive-ins here were on Tuesdays. So like, I know it was a Tuesday night. So I went back and I looked in the tunes, and I found the ones I had been giving him were wrong. So I found that date in 2024 when we come back from there, and when I had been driving home from that, and then the tunes, like, you know, on the way to the cruise in and then back, and then 2 tunes that were this weekend before where I had done some driving and stuff like that. So I had figured that out. So that was, as far as that goes, I had now given him the right information. So once I did that, then he could look at them. And like I said, now we're just kind of backing into things, you know, with trying to use a good, not bass tune, but you know what I mean, a good tune that had worked the last time we had done something. So kind of doing that. And now we're just kind of working on some idle and fuels and stuff like that. So, and like I said, with the engine have been apart and the valve adjustments and, you know, the new fuel pump system and whatnot, obviously the tune isn't going to be a dead-on match, because we've made adjustments and things are not the same as they were 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, when that tune, you know, was in. But that's neither here nor there. Sorry, I said I was going to keep it short. So that's kind of where we're at. So fingers crossed, hopefully making progress at this point. And it does run. She fires right up now and sounds pretty decent. And now we're just kind of trying to work on get things dialed in, and then maybe gets a little bit better out. Maybe I get some pieces back here and can drive around the block or whatnot. We can start working on some drivability. But that's about it for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.